The Texas sun beat down on what used to be Jake Morrison's pride and joy. Cracked earth stretched as far as his eyes could see, and the empty water troughs mocked him with their dry, splintered wood. 3 years ago, this ranch had been thriving. 2 years ago, his wife Sarah had died giving birth to their stillborn son. 1 year ago, the drought began. Now, at 34 years old, Jake had nothing left but debt and dust. He stood at the edge of his property, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the barren land. At 6'4", he'd always been bigger than most men, but lately he felt small, powerless. The bank had given him until the end of the month. 3 weeks. 3 weeks to come up with money he didn't have, or lose the land his father had died defending during the war. Jake ran a calloused hand through his dark hair, now streaked with premature grey at the temples. His blue eyes, once bright with dreams, had grown dull and tired. He hadn't looked at himself in a mirror in months. Didn't see the point. There was no one to look good for anymore. The sound of a carriage approaching made him turn. Dust rose in a cloud behind an elegant black coach, completely out of place in this dying corner of Texas. Jake frowned. No one came out here anymore. Not the neighbors who'd already lost their own ranches. Not the townspeople who whispered about him behind his back, calling him cursed. The carriage rolled to a stop, and Jake's frown deepened when he saw the quality of the horses. These weren't working animals. These were expensive, well-fed, glossy creatures that had no business in drought country. The door opened, and a woman stepped down before the driver could assist her. Jake's breath caught. She was beautiful, but not in the delicate way Sarah had been. This woman was perhaps 30 years old, with rich auburn hair swept up beneath a fashionable hat. Her dress was dark green silk, cut in the latest Eastern style, and probably cost more than his entire herd had been worth. But it was her eyes that stopped him. Green as spring grass, and filled with something he couldn't quite name. Sadness, maybe. Or determination. "Mr. Morrison?" Her voice was cultured, confident. "I'm Catherine Thornton. I've come about the water." Jake blinked. "Mom, I don't know who told you I had water to sell, but they lied to you. I've got about as much water as I've got gold, which is to say none at all." A small smile crossed her lips. "I know. That's why I'm here. I have water, Mr. Morrison, more than I could ever use. And you have land that could be productive again, with the right resources." She paused, her green eyes studying his face with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "I'd like to propose a partnership." Jake's jaw tightened. He'd heard about partnerships before. Rich folks buying up desperate ranchers' land for pennies on the dollar, calling it help. "I'm not selling. I'm not buying." Catherine stepped closer, and Jake caught the scent of lavender. His chest tightened. Sarah had smelled like wildflowers. This woman smelled like money and eastern cities and everything Jake had never wanted. "I'm proposing something different. My late husband left me a ranch 30 miles north. It has 3 natural springs that have never run dry, but I can't manage it alone. I need someone who knows the land, who knows cattle, who can rebuild. So hire a foreman." "I don't want a foreman, Mr. Morrison. I want a partner. Someone with as much to lose as I have. Someone who will fight for success because his own survival depends on it." Her eyes didn't waver from his face. "I've made inquiries about you. They say you're honest, hard-working, that you treat animals and people with respect. That's worth more than experience to me." Jake's throat felt tight. "They also say I'm cursed, that everything I touch dies." Catherine's expression softened. "They said similar things about me when my husband died. A woman of means with no family, no children. Clearly I must have done something to deserve such loneliness." Her voice carried a bitter edge. "I stopped listening to what people say, Mr. Morrison. I suggest you do the same." He wanted to refuse, wanted to send this too beautiful, too refined woman back to wherever she came from, but the desperation clawing at his insides wouldn't let him. "What exactly are you proposing?" "Come see the ranch. Stay for a week. If you think we can make it work, we'll draw up a contract. You bring your knowledge and your labor. I bring the resources and the water. We split the profits equally." "And if I say no?" Catherine's eyes held his. "Then I'll leave, and you'll lose this land in 3 weeks, and I'll struggle alone with a ranch I don't know how to run. We'll both fail separately instead of succeeding together." The truth of her words hit him like a fist to the gut. Jake looked past her at his dying land, then back at her face. She was waiting, patient, her green eyes full of something that might have been hope. "1 week," he heard himself say. "I'll give you 1 week." But the smile that broke across Catherine's face was like sunrise after a long night, and Jake felt something shift in his chest, something that felt dangerously close to hope. Catherine's ranch was called Sweetwater Springs, and the name was no exaggeration. Jake stood staring at the creek that ran through the property, water flowing clear and abundant, and felt his eyes burn. He'd forgotten what running water looked like. The main house was large but needed work. Paint peeled from the siding, and several shutters hung crooked. The barn was solid, though, and the land stretched for acres, most of it good grazing ground that had survived the drought thanks to those blessed springs. "My husband bought this place 5 years ago," Catherine said, standing beside him. "He had big dreams, wanted to build an empire out here." Her voice grew quiet. "Then he got sick. Took 6 months for the fever to claim him. I've been trying to maintain things, but I don't know enough. The hands I hired either quit or tried to take advantage of me." Jake glanced down at her. She was tall for a woman, but still had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. There was strength in her face, but also weariness. "You've been managing alone for how long?" "A year, same as your drought." She smiled sadly. "Seems we've both been surviving rather than living." The observation struck too close to home. Jake turned away, focusing on the land. "You've got enough water here to support 200 head, maybe more. The grazing is good. You need to repair the fences, bring in new stock, hire reliable hands." "Can you do that?" "Yes." The word came out rougher than he intended. "But it'll take time and money." "I have money, Mr. Morrison. What I need is someone I can trust to spend it wisely." Catherine moved to stand in front of him, forcing him to look at her. "Can I trust you?" Her directness unsettled him. Most women he knew danced around subjects, spoke in hints and suggestions. Catherine Thornton said exactly what she meant, and her green eyes demanded the same honesty in return. "You can trust me," Jake said quietly. "I don't lie and I don't steal. I'll work harder than any man you could hire, and I'll treat this land like it's my own. It would be half yours. That's the arrangement I'm proposing." Jake's chest tightened. "Why? You don't know me. For all you know, I could be planning to cheat you." Catherine's laugh was soft and surprisingly warm. "Are you planning to cheat me, Mr. Morrison?" "No, ma'am." "Then we have no problem." She extended her hand, small and pale against his large, sun-darkened one. "Partners." Jake hesitated only a moment before taking her hand. Her skin was soft, but her grip was firm. "Partners." The contact lasted longer than a business handshake should. Jake found himself noticing details he had no business noticing. The way afternoon light caught gold threads in her auburn hair, the sprinkle of freckles across her nose that her expensive powder couldn't quite hide, the fullness of her lower lip. He dropped her hand like it had burned him and stepped back. "I should look at the barn, check what repairs are needed." If Catherine noticed his abrupt retreat, she didn't comment. "I'll show you where you'll be staying." The foreman's house is small but comfortable. The foreman's house was a cabin set 100 yards from the main house. One room with a bed, table, stove, and not much else. But it was clean and solid, and the roof didn't leak. More than Jake had expected. "I'll bring your things over," Catherine said from the doorway. "Will you join me for dinner? I know I'm not much of a cook." but I can manage not to poison us." Jake wanted to refuse. Wanted to keep distance between himself and this woman who made him feel things he had no right to feel. But refusing would be rude, and Jake's mother had raised him better than that. "Yes, ma'am. What time?" "7. And Mr. Morrison." She smiled. "You can call me Catherine. We're partners now, after all." She left before he could respond, her skirts swishing softly against the doorframe. Jake sat heavily on the bed and dropped his head into his hands. What had he gotten himself into? Dinner was awkward. Catherine had been honest about her cooking skills. The steak was tough, the potatoes were burned, and the biscuits could have doubled as ammunition. But Jake ate every bite without complaint, and Catherine's embarrassed laughter made the meal almost pleasant. "I'm sorry," she said, pushing food around her plate. "I grew up with servants. My father was a banker in Boston. I never learned to cook until Richard died, and clearly I haven't learned much since." "It's edible," Jake offered. "That's more than some cowboys can manage." "You're being kind." Catherine set down her fork. "Tell me about your ranch, Mr. Morrison. What was it like before the drought?" The question pierced something in Jake's chest. "It was good. My father built it from nothing. After he died in the war, I took over, married Sarah, started building our herd. We were going to have children, fill the house with noise and laughter." His voice roughened. "She died 2 years ago. Childbirth. The baby didn't make it either." Catherine's hand covered his before he realized she'd moved. Her touch was gentle, warm. "I'm so sorry." Jake stared at their joined hands. He should pull away, should maintain professional distance. But he'd been so alone for so long, and her touch felt like absolution for sins he couldn't name. "Your husband," he said quietly. "You loved him?" Catherine's hand stiffened slightly but didn't withdraw. "I respected him. He was kind to me, which was more than many women in my position could say. Our marriage was arranged by our families. I was 19, he was 45. Love wasn't part of the agreement." Jake looked up at her face. Sadness lingered in her green eyes, but also something else. Resignation, maybe. "But you stayed, cared for him when he was sick. He was my husband. What else would I have done?" Catherine finally pulled her hand back, but slowly, as if reluctant. "He left me well provided for. This ranch, investments, enough money to live comfortably for the rest of my life. But he couldn't give me what I really wanted." "What's that?" Her eyes met his, and Jake's breath caught at the vulnerability in them. "A partnership. Someone to share burdens with. Someone who sees me as more than a pretty decoration or a means to an end." She smiled sadly. "I know it sounds foolish. A woman of means complaining about being lonely." "It's not foolish." Jake's voice came out rougher than intended. "Loneliness doesn't care about bank accounts." They sat in silence for a long moment, the air between them thick with understanding. Two people who'd lost what they loved, trying to build something new from the ruins. Finally, Catherine stood. "I should let you get some rest. Tomorrow we can start making plans." Jake rose as well, his height making the dining room feel suddenly smaller. "Catherine?" She turned, and he realized it was the first time he'd used her name. "Yes?" "Thank you for the opportunity. I won't let you down." Her smile was soft, genuine. "I know you won't, Jake." The sound of his name in her voice did something to his insides. He watched her walk away, then returned to his cabin and lay awake most of the night, wondering what he was really afraid of. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. Jake threw himself into work with the desperation of a drowning man grasping for shore. He repaired fences, reinforced the barn, drew up plans for expanding the herd. Catherine worked alongside him, her expensive dresses replaced with practical work clothes that somehow made her even more beautiful. She was stronger than she looked, not afraid of hard work or getting dirty. She asked questions constantly, wanting to understand every aspect of ranching, and remembered everything he told her. More than once, Jake found himself forgetting she was his partner, and not just a woman he was getting to know. A woman who made him laugh with her dry observations about cattle behavior, who brought him water when he forgot to drink, who looked at him like he was someone worth knowing, not just a cursed failure. It was dangerous. He knew it was dangerous. But he couldn't seem to stop. On the 14th day, disaster struck. A section of fence collapsed during the night, and half a dozen cattle wandered onto the neighboring property. The neighbor, a bitter old man named Hutchins, came thundering over at dawn, demanding compensation for the trespassing animals. "Those beasts trampled my vegetable garden," Hutchins shouted, his face red with fury. "I want $50 for damages." Jake's jaw tightened. The damages were nowhere near $50, but Hutchins had always been a difficult man. "I'll fix your fence and replace the vegetables, that's fair." "Fair? Fair would be you keeping your damn animals on your own land." "That's enough, Mr. Hutchins." Catherine appeared on the porch, her voice calm but firm. "We'll compensate you for actual damages. $20, and Mr. Morrison will repair your garden fence." Hutchins' eyes narrowed. $20 from the rich widow? How generous. "Tell me, Mrs. Thornton, what exactly is your arrangement with Morrison here? Awful convenient, you two living so close together." The insinuation in his voice made Jake's blood boil. He stepped forward, his size alone making Hutchins step back. "Watch your mouth." "Or what, you'll hit me? That'll just prove what everyone says about you. Violent, unstable, can't keep anything alive." Jake's fist clenched, but Catherine's hand on his arm stopped him. Her touch was gentle but grounding. "Mr. Hutchins, you have two choices. Accept our offer and leave peacefully, or refuse and deal with the sheriff when I file a complaint about your harassment. Which will it be?" Hutchins sputtered, but Catherine's calm certainty defeated him. He snatched the money she held out and stormed off, muttering insults under his breath. When he was gone, Jake realized he was shaking, not with anger, but with something deeper, shame. "I'm sorry. I nearly made things worse. You defended us." "There's no shame in that." Catherine's hand was still on his arm, her fingers warm through his shirt. "Though I appreciate you letting me handle it. Some men would have felt emasculated by a woman fighting their battles." Jake looked down at her green eyes full of understanding, her lips curved in a small smile, the way she stood close enough that he could smell lavender and sunshine. Something in him cracked. "I'm not most men," he said quietly. "I know." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "That's why I chose you." The air between them grew heavy, charged. Jake was acutely aware of every place their bodies almost touched, the height difference between them. The way she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, how easy it would be to lean down, to close the distance, to finally taste those lips he'd been trying not to notice for 2 weeks. Catherine's breath hitched, and Jake realized she was thinking the same thing. Wanting the same thing, he stepped back abruptly. "I should fix that fence." Hurt flashed across Catherine's face before she masked it. "Of course. I'll start lunch." Jake fled to the barn, his heart pounding. He couldn't do this, couldn't let himself feel this way. He was here to save his ranch, not to fall for a woman so far above him she might as well be the moon. But that night, lying in his narrow bed, all he could think about was the look in Catherine's eyes. The way she'd swayed toward him, the realization that maybe, just maybe, she wanted him too. It was a dangerous thought, a thought that kept him awake until dawn. After that day, something shifted between them. The easy companionship became tinged with tension. Jake caught Catherine watching him when she thought he wasn't looking. Their hands brushed more often than accident could explain. Conversations ended in loaded silences that made his chest tight. Jake tried to maintain distance, but Catherine seemed determined to close it. She found excuses to work near him, asked for his help with tasks she could have managed alone, touched his arm, his shoulder, his hand with increasing frequency. It was torture. Sweet, agonizing torture. The following Sunday, Catherine asked Jake to accompany her to church. He'd been avoiding town, avoiding the whispers and stares, but the hope in her eyes made it impossible to refuse. "People need to see us together," she said, adjusting his borrowed tie. Her fingers lingered at his collar, and Jake's breath caught. "See that we're legitimate partners, that this arrangement is proper." Jake caught her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "Is that the only reason you want me there?" Catherine's green eyes met his, and the vulnerability in them made his chest ache. "No. I want them to see that I chose well, that you're a man worth standing beside." "Catherine?" "Let me finish." She stepped closer, and Jake could smell lavender and something uniquely her. "I spent 20 years being paraded around like a prize horse. Look at the banker's pretty daughter. Look at Richard Thornton's young wife. I was always someone's possession, someone's ornament, but when I stand next to you, I feel like a person, like someone with thoughts and opinions that matter. I want people to see that." Jake's throat felt tight. His large hands cupped her face gently, marveling at how delicate she felt beneath his calloused palms. "You've always been a person, Catherine. Anyone who couldn't see that was a fool." Her smile was tremulous. "Then be my fool, Jake Morrison. Come to church with me and let the whole town see." Church was an exercise in patience. Jake felt every eye on them as they walked down the aisle. Catherine's hand rested lightly on his arm, her head high, and Jake drew strength from her confidence. They sat in the third pew, and Jake tried to focus on the sermon instead of the whispers behind them. Afterward, several women approached Catherine while their husbands eyed Jake with varying degrees of suspicion and curiosity. Martha Reynolds, the pastor's wife, was the first to speak. "Mrs. Thornton, how lovely to see you, and this must be your new partner." Her eyes travelled up Jake's considerable height with poorly concealed surprise. "Mr. Jake Morrison," Catherine said smoothly. "Jake, this is Martha Reynolds. Her husband delivered that wonderful sermon." Jake removed his hat. "Ma'am, your husband speaks well. Gave me something to think about." Martha's expression softened slightly. "He'll be pleased to hear that. Tell me, Mr. Morrison, what brings you to Sweetwater Springs?" Before Jake could answer, Catherine spoke. "Good fortune, Mrs. Reynolds. Mine and his both. Mr. Morrison has agreed to help me manage the ranch. His expertise has already proven invaluable." "I see." Martha's gaze sharpened. "And where are you staying, Mr. Morrison?" The question held an edge that made Jake's jaw tighten, but Catherine's hand on his arm was steady, grounding. "In the foreman's cabin, naturally. Everything is quite proper, I assure you." "Of course." Martha's smile didn't reach her eyes. "It's just that people do talk, dear. A woman of your station, alone with a man—" "Mrs. Reynolds," Jake interrupted, his voice low but firm. "I understand your concern, but I give you my word as a Christian man that Mrs. Thornton's reputation is safe with me. I'm here to work, nothing more." It was a lie, and they both knew it, but it was the lie society needed to hear. Martha studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "I believe you, Mr. Morrison. Welcome to our community." As they walked back to the wagon, Catherine was quiet. Jake helped her up, his hands spanning her waist easily, and tried not to notice how perfectly she fit against him for that brief moment. "I'm sorry," he said once they were moving. "I shouldn't have spoken for you. You defended us both. There's nothing to apologize for." Catherine looked at him, her expression troubled. But Martha was right about one thing. People are going to talk. They already are. The widow and the drifter, working together, living on the same property. I can move to town, find a room above the saloon, or no. Catherine's hand caught his arm. I don't want you to leave. I wish we didn't have to pretend, wish we could be honest about what this is becoming. Jake's hands tightened on the reins. And what is it becoming, Catherine? She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then softly, something I've wanted my whole life and never thought I'd have. Something real. Jake pulled the wagon to a stop on a quiet stretch of road. He turned to face her fully, his blue eyes searching her green ones. You want real? Here's real. I think about you constantly. Wonder what you're doing when you're not with me. Listen for your voice, your laugh. I go to sleep thinking about you and wake up the same way. It's driving me half mad, Catherine, because I know I shouldn't feel this way. You're my partner, my employer in a sense, and I'm, what? Poor, scarred by loss, human? Catherine's hand covered his on the seat between them. Jake, do you think I care about any of that? I've had wealth, I've had status, I've had a marriage that looked perfect on paper. None of it made me happy, but working beside you, laughing with you, building something together, that makes me happy. You make me happy. Jake's resolve crumbled. He leaned forward, his forehead resting against hers, their breath mingling. This is dangerous, I know. If people find out, let them talk. Catherine's hand slid to his cheek, her thumb tracing his jawline. I'm tired of living for other people's approval, Jake. I want to live for myself, for us. Catherine, her name was a plea, a prayer, a surrender. Kiss me, she whispered. Please. Just once, kiss me without pulling away. Jake's control shattered. His hand slid into her hair, dislodging her hat as he claimed her lips with all the hunger he'd been suppressing for weeks. Catherine made a small sound and pressed closer, her hands fisting in his shirt, and Jake was lost. The kiss was everything, and not enough. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jake rested his forehead against hers again. We can't keep doing this, he said hoarsely. Eventually, someone will see. Someone will know. Then we make it legitimate. Catherine's eyes blazed with determination. We make this partnership into something no one can question. Jake knew what she was suggesting, knew it was the practical solution, the way to protect them both. But he couldn't do it. Couldn't trap her in a marriage with a man who had nothing to offer but calloused hands and a broken past. You deserve more than practicality, he said roughly, pulling back. More than a marriage of convenience. Catherine's laugh was bitter. I had that already, remember? My marriage to Richard was nothing but convenient. Our families approved, our finances aligned, society smiled upon us. And I was lonely every single day. She caught his face in both hands, forcing him to look at her. I don't want convenient, Jake. I want you. Stubborn, honorable, impossible you. I have nothing. You have everything that matters. Her voice broke. You have kindness and strength and integrity. You look at me like I hung the moon. And you listen when I talk about ranch management, like my ideas actually matter. You make me feel valued, Jake. Seen. That's worth more than all the gold in California. Jake's chest felt too tight to breathe. He wanted to argue, to list all the reasons this was a terrible idea. But looking at Catherine's face, at the tears gathering in her green eyes and the stubborn set of her jaw, he couldn't find the words. You're sure? He asked quietly. Once we do this, there's no going back. You'll be tied to me, for better or worse. I've never been more sure of anything. Catherine's smile was tremulous, but real. Are you? Jake thought about his empty ranch, his empty house, his empty life before Catherine had driven up in her fancy carriage and offered him hope. Thought about the past 3 weeks, working beside her, laughing with her, falling for her a little more each day. Yes, he said simply, I'm sure. They sealed the promise with another kiss, slower this time, tender and full of everything they couldn't yet say aloud. When they finally continued home, Catherine's hand stayed in Jake's, and neither of them cared who might see. The next few days passed in a blur of quiet anticipation. They didn't announce their intentions yet, wanting time to plan properly. But the air between them had changed, charged with promise and possibility. Jake found himself watching Catherine with new eyes. The way she bit her lip when concentrating on the ledgers, the grace with which she moved despite her practical work clothes, the strength in her hands when she helped him mend fence. She was beautiful, yes, but more than that, she was capable, smart, brave enough to risk everything on a partnership with a stranger. One evening, as they sat on the porch reviewing the day's work, Catherine suddenly spoke. "Tell me about Sarah." Jake stiffened. "Why?" "Because she was part of your life. Part of what made you who you are." Catherine's hand found his in the darkness. "I'm not jealous of a memory, Jake. I just want to understand." It was the first time anyone had asked. Most people avoided mentioning Sarah, treating her like a shameful secret instead of a woman Jake had loved and lost. "She was kind," Jake said slowly, "gentle. Loved flowers and birds and anything beautiful. She made our house feel like a home." He paused, the old pain surfacing. "But she was fragile. The pregnancy was hard on her. The doctor warned us, but we wanted a child so badly. When she went into labor..." His voice roughened. "It took 2 days. I heard every scream, every cry for help I couldn't give. When it was over, they were both gone, my wife and my son." Catherine's grip tightened on his hand. "I'm so sorry. I blamed myself, still do sometimes. If I'd been more careful, if I'd listened to the doctor's warnings, then you'd have denied Sarah something she wanted," Catherine interrupted gently. "Women aren't fragile things to be protected from life, Jake. We're strong enough to make our own choices, even dangerous ones. Sarah chose to try for a child. That was her right, her decision. The outcome was tragic, but it wasn't your fault." Jake turned to look at her in the dim light. "You really believe that?" "I do." Catherine shifted closer, her shoulder against his. "And I think Sarah would want you to be happy again, to build a new life, a new family. Love doesn't diminish because we find it again. It expands." "You're wiser than I gave you credit for," Jake said softly. "I'm a widow too, remember? I understand loss. Understand that moving forward doesn't mean forgetting." Catherine looked up at him. "When we marry, I'm not trying to replace Sarah. I'm just hoping to write a new chapter, for both of us." Jake pulled her close, tucking her against his side. She fit there perfectly, warm and solid and real. "What did I do to deserve you? You were honest. You were yourself. That's all I ever wanted." They sat in comfortable silence, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. Tomorrow they would work. Tomorrow they would plan their future. But tonight they simply existed together. Two lonely souls who'd found unexpected solace in each other's company. The peace was shattered 3 days later when a rider came galloping up to the ranch, his horse lathered and heaving. Jake recognized him as Tom Parker, who worked at the general store. "Fire!" Tom shouted. "Fire at the Hutchins place! They're asking for all available hands!" Jake and Catherine exchanged glances. Despite their difficulties with Hutchins, no one deserved to lose everything to fire. Within minutes, they'd saddled horses and were racing toward the Hutchins ranch. The scene was chaos. Flames engulfed the barn, orange and terrible against the twilight sky. Men formed bucket lines from the well, but it was clear the barn was lost. The focus now was keeping the fire from spreading to the house. Jake threw himself into the work, his height and strength allowing him to pass buckets faster than most. Beside him, Catherine worked just as hard, her face smudged with soot, her expensive dress ruined. For 2 hours they fought, until finally the fire began to die, contained if not defeated. When it was over, Jake found Catherine sitting on the ground near the well, coughing from smoke inhalation. He knelt beside her immediately, his large hands gentle as he checked her over. "Are you hurt?" "Just tired," she rasped. "And my throat hurts." Jake grabbed a dipper of water and held it to her lips. "Drink." Slowly, Catherine obeyed, her eyes on his face the whole time. Around them, exhausted men were gathering, congratulating each other on saving the house. Hutchins himself stood near the smoking ruins of his barn, his face grey with shock. Jake should have felt vindicated, should have enjoyed seeing his enemy brought low. Instead, he just felt tired and sad. "I should talk to him." Catherine's hand caught his wrist. "Why? He's been nothing but cruel to you." "Because I know what it's like to lose everything." Jake squeezed her hand. "I'll be right back." Approaching Hutchins felt like walking into enemy territory, but Jake forced himself forward. The old man looked up as Jake's shadow fell across him. "Come to gloat, Morrison?" "No, sir." Jake's voice was quiet. "Came to ask if there's anything you need. Shelter for your animals, hands to help rebuild." Hutchins's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Why would you help me?" "Because it's the right thing to do." Jake met his gaze steadily. "We've had our differences, Mr. Hutchins. But I wouldn't wish this on anyone. If you need help, I'm offering." For a long moment, Hutchins just stared at him. Then, slowly, the old man's shoulders sagged. "I've been a bastard to you." "Yes, sir, you have." The blunt agreement startled a laugh out of Hutchins, rough and bitter. "You don't pull punches, do you?" "Never saw the point." Jake looked at the ruined barn. "Fire start from the lamp?" "Think so, I was careless." Hutchins' voice cracked. "Built that barn with my own hands 30 years ago. Now it's gone. Barns can be rebuilt. You're alive. Your house is safe. That's what matters." Hutchins looked at Jake with something like respect. "You really mean that, don't you? The help offer?" "I do." The old man was quiet for another moment. Then, "I'm sorry. For the lies, the accusations, all of it. You're a better man than I gave you credit for." It wasn't absolution, but it was something. Jake nodded. "Offer stands. You need help, you come find me." As Jake walked back to Catherine, he felt lighter somehow. She stood as he approached, her soot-stained face breaking into a smile. "What did he say?" "Apologized, mostly." Jake pulled her close, not caring who saw. "Accepted my help offer." "You're a good man, Jake Morrison," Catherine said softly, "even to people who don't deserve it. Everyone deserves a second chance." Jake looked down at her, this woman who'd given him exactly that. "Someone wise taught me that." 3 weeks into his stay, a summer storm rolled in. Not the rain they desperately needed, but a violent thunderstorm that shook the house and lit the sky with lightning. Jake was checking the barn when Catherine appeared in the doorway, drenched and shivering. "The porch roof is leaking," she said, wrapping her arms around herself. "Right over my bed. I brought buckets, but the wind keeps knocking them over." Jake grabbed a tarp. "Show me." Catherine's bedroom was at the back of the house, decorated in soft greens and creams that suited her. The leak was bad, water pouring through a crack in the ceiling and soaking the thick carpet. Jake climbed onto a chair to secure the tarp while Catherine held it steady. A particularly loud crack of thunder made her jump, and her hand slipped. Jake caught himself before falling, but the momentum brought him down hard, directly against Catherine. They stumbled backward together, and Jake's arms went around her instinctively, pulling her against his chest as his back hit the wall. For a moment, neither moved. Catherine's body was pressed fully against his, her wet dress soaking through his shirt. Jake could feel every curve of her, soft and warm and perfect in his arms. Her face was inches from his, her green eyes wide, her lips parted. "Catherine," he breathed. And it wasn't a warning, it was a plea. She rose onto her toes, closing the distance between them, and kissed him. The world exploded. Jake's control shattered like glass. His arms tightened around her, one hand sliding into her damp hair, while the other pressed against the small of her back, holding her closer. Catherine made a small sound against his mouth, her hands clutching his shoulders, and Jake deepened the kiss with a hunger that terrified him. She tasted like honey and promise and everything he'd been denying himself. Her body molded against his, like she was made to fit there. When her fingers tangled in his hair, Jake groaned and backed her against the wall, his large frame surrounding her completely. The kiss gentled, turned tender. Jake pulled back just enough to look at her face. Catherine's eyes were dark with desire, her lips swollen from his kiss, her chest heaving. She looked utterly undone, and Jake had never seen anything more beautiful. "We shouldn't," he whispered, even as his thumb traced her lower lip. "Why not?" Catherine's voice was breathless. "Because you're afraid, or because you think I deserve better than a drought-stricken rancher?" The words hit him like a slap. "You do deserve better. That's not your choice to make." Her hands cupped his face, gentle despite the fire in her eyes. "I've spent my entire life being told what I deserve, what's appropriate, what's proper. My parents chose my husband. Society chose my place. For once, I want to choose." Her thumb brushed his cheekbone. "I choose you, Jake Morrison. I choose the man who works until his hands bleed, who treats his animals with kindness and faces his failures with dignity, who looks at me like I'm worth something beyond my bank account." Jake's throat felt tight. "You are worth something. You're worth everything." "Then stop pushing me away." Catherine pulled his head down until their foreheads touched. "I'm not fragile, Jake. I'm not going to break. And I'm tired of being alone." "So am I," Jake admitted, the words torn from somewhere deep in his chest. "God help me, so am I." When he kissed her this time, it was different, slower, deeper, a claiming and a surrender all at once. Catherine melted against him with a sigh that made his blood burn, and Jake lost himself in her completely. The storm raged outside, but inside they created their own tempest. Jake woke before dawn, Catherine's body warm against his side. Sunlight filtered through the window, painting everything gold. He'd expected to feel regret, shame, something to punish himself with. Instead, he felt peace. Catherine stirred, her eyes fluttering open. When she saw him, her smile was soft and unguarded in a way that made his heart stutter. "Good morning," she whispered. "Morning." Jake brushed a strand of auburn hair from her face. "Any regrets?" "None." Catherine's hand covered his on her cheek. "You?" "Not a single one." It was the truth. Whatever consequences came from this, Jake couldn't regret the night that had given him back something he thought he'd lost forever. Hope, connection. The feeling of being seen and wanted for who he was, not what he could provide. They stayed like that, just looking at each other as dawn broke over Sweetwater Springs. Finally, Catherine sat up, the sheet pooling around her waist. "What happens now?" Jake knew what she was really asking, what this meant for their partnership, their future, whether last night had been a moment of weakness or something more. He sat up beside her, taking her hand in his. Her fingers looked so small against his calloused palm. "I don't know what I can offer you, Catherine. My ranch is dying. I'm in debt up to my neck. All I have is hard work and good intentions." "That's more than many men have." Catherine's green eyes were steady. "I'm not asking you to save me, Jake. I don't need saving. What I need is a partner, someone to build something with. Someone who sees me as an equal, not a prize or a burden." "You are an equal." The words came easily because they were true. "These past weeks, working with you, planning with you, you're not just funding this operation, Catherine. You're shaping it. Your ideas, your insights, they're making this ranch better than I could have made it alone." Pride and pleasure bloomed across Catherine's face. "Do you mean that?" "I don't say things I don't mean." Jake raised their joined hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. You want honesty? Here it is. I'm falling for you. Have been since that first day when you stood in front of me and offered partnership instead of charity. You scare the hell out of me because I don't know how to be what you need, but I want to try. Catherine's eyes shimmered with tears. What I need is you, exactly as you are, honest and hard-working and gentle. The man who kisses me like I'm precious, but treats me like I'm strong. That's all I've ever wanted. Jake pulled her into his arms, holding her close against his chest. Then that's what you'll have, for as long as you'll let me. Forever, then. Catherine's voice was muffled against his shoulder. Because I'm not letting you go. They held each other as the sun rose fully, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Outside, the land was still dry, still struggling. But inside this room, something new was growing, something that might just be stronger than drought or debt or the ghosts of the past. The next month transformed everything. Jake threw himself into rebuilding with renewed energy, and Catherine matched him step for step. They worked side by side during the day, planning and building and dreaming. At night, they fell into each other's arms with a passion that never seemed to diminish. But the outside world couldn't be ignored forever. The bank sent another letter about Jake's ranch. The debt was still there, still demanding payment. Catherine offered to pay it immediately, but Jake refused. It's my debt, he said firmly, my responsibility. We're partners, Catherine argued. Your debts are mine too. In the ranch work, yes. In old obligations, no. Jake's jaw was set stubbornly. I won't start this by owing you, Catherine. Let me earn it. They fought about it for 3 days before Catherine finally, reluctantly, agreed to wait. But the tension lingered, a reminder that the world beyond Sweetwater Springs still had claims on them both. Then Hutchins came back. This time he brought the sheriff, claiming that Jake had threatened him during their last encounter. It was a lie, but Hutchins had 2 friends who swore they'd witnessed it. The sheriff, a tired-looking man named Warren, seemed skeptical but had to investigate. Look, Morrison, Warren said quietly while Hutchins ranted in the background. I know Hutchins is a pain in the neck, but he's making accusations. I need to hear your side. Before Jake could answer, Catherine stepped forward. Sheriff Warren, I was present during the entire encounter Mr. Hutchins is describing. There were no threats made. Mr. Morrison maintained perfect composure despite extreme provocation. Hutchins's face turned red. She's lying. She'd say anything to protect him. Are you calling me a liar, Mr. Hutchins? Catherine's voice went cold in a way that reminded Jake she'd been raised in Boston society, where cutting words were an art form. Because I'm happy to bring this before a judge. My word against yours, and your conveniently appearing witnesses. I wonder whose testimony a judge would find more credible, a respected widow with no history of complaints, or a man known for filing frivolous grievances against his neighbors. Warren's lips twitched. She's got a point, Hutchins. This is the 3rd complaint you've filed this year. You're all against me. First Morrison moves in next door. Now he's got his rich woman buying him out of trouble. Jake stepped forward, and despite Catherine's hand on his arm, his voice was steel. I've been patient with you, Hutchins, but you call Catherine names one more time. And partner or not, debt or not, I will make you regret it. There! Hutchins pointed triumphantly. Another threat! You heard him, Sheriff. But Warren was shaking his head. What I heard was a man defending a lady's honor. That's not a crime in my book. He turned to Jake. Though I'd advise cooling that temper, Morrison. Hutchins may be a jackass, but he's a jackass with friends in town. After the sheriff and Hutchins left, Catherine turned to Jake with worried eyes. He's not going to stop. He wants you gone. I know. Jake's jaw was tight. The question is why. My old ranch isn't worth anything to him. But this one is. Catherine's eyes widened. Jake, Hutchins owns the land between here and the river. If he could drive us out, he'd have access to our springs. He could control all the water in this area. The realization hit Jake like a fist. Of course, water was more valuable than gold in drought country. He's been trying to buy this place. Richard refused him repeatedly. So did I after Richard died. Catherine's hand found Jake's. He's not going to give up. He'll keep pushing until we break, or until we do something he can use against us. Jake looked down at their joined hands. At this woman who'd given him back hope and purpose, and something dangerously close to love. Then we need to make sure he can't. How? An idea was forming in Jake's mind. Crazy, impossible, but maybe their only option. We get married. Catherine's breath caught. What? Think about it. Jake turned to face her fully, his large hands gentle on her shoulders. Right now, we're business partners. Easy to separate, easy to attack individually, but if we're married, this becomes legally your property, and mine jointly. Hutchins can't claim I'm taking advantage of you if you're my wife. And any attempts to drive us out become attacks on a married couple, not a questionable partnership. That's a business reason for marriage. Catherine's voice was carefully neutral. Is that all it would be? Jake's hands slid from her shoulders to cup her face. You know it's not. I love you, Catherine. Wasn't planning on it, wasn't looking for it, but there it is. You make me want to be better. Make me believe I can be. And maybe I'm a fool for thinking you could love me back, but... Catherine kissed him, hard and desperate, and full of everything she couldn't say. When she pulled back, her eyes were bright with tears. Yes. Yes, you love me, or yes, you'll marry me. Both, you impossible man. Catherine laughed through her tears. Yes to both. Jake pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet in a hug that made her squeal. When he set her down, his smile was wider than it had been in years. We'll do it right. Not rushed, not secret. I want everyone to know you chose me. I want everyone to know you chose me, Catherine corrected. The cursed rancher and the lonely widow. We're quite a pair. The best pair. Jake kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. I promise I'll spend the rest of my life proving you made the right choice. I know I did. Catherine's arms wrapped around his waist. Now let's go tell Hutchins he can choke on his water rights. Jake laughed, deep and genuine, and thought that maybe, just maybe, they were going to be all right. They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in town. Catherine wore a simple dress of cream silk, and Jake borrowed a suit from the general store owner. Half the town came, some out of genuine goodwill, others out of curiosity, to see the unlikely couple. The morning of the wedding, Jake stood in his cabin, staring at his reflection in the small mirror. The suit fit well enough, though it pulled slightly across his broad shoulders. His hair was neatly combed, his face freshly shaved. He looked almost respectable, almost like a man worthy of Catherine Thornton. You ready, son? Jake turned to find Pastor Reynolds in the doorway. The older man had offered to help Jake prepare, a kindness Jake hadn't expected. Nervous, Jake admitted. Keep thinking she'll come to her senses. Reynolds chuckled. I've married a lot of couples in my time. Some clearly suited, some clearly not. You and Catherine, you're suited. I can see it in how you look at each other, how you work together. That woman chose you with her eyes wide open, Morrison. Trust that. I'm just a rancher. She could have had anyone. She could have had anyone with money, sure, but she wanted someone with character, someone who treats her like an equal, not a possession. Reynolds clapped Jake on the shoulder. From what I've seen, that's exactly what you are. Now come on. Your bride is waiting. The walk to the church felt both endless and too short. Jake's heart pounded as he took his place at the altar, Pastor Reynolds beside him. The church was decorated simply with wildflowers, Catherine's choice. She'd insisted on keeping everything modest, refusing to flaunt her wealth. Then the doors opened, and Jake forgot how to breathe. Catherine walked alone down the aisle, her head high, her smile radiant. The cream silk dress was elegant but simple, fitting her perfectly. She'd left her auburn hair partially down, soft waves framing her face. But it was her eyes that stopped Jake's heart. They were fixed on him with such love, such certainty, that he felt unworthy and blessed all at once. When she reached him, Jake took her hands in his, marveling at how small and delicate they felt. "You're beautiful," he whispered. "You're not so bad yourself," Catherine whispered back, her eyes twinkling. For a dusty cowboy. Pastor Reynolds cleared his throat, and the ceremony began. Jake barely heard the words, too focused on Catherine's face, on the tears gathering in her green eyes, on the trembling of her hands in his. When it came time for vows, Jake's voice was steady despite his pounding heart. "I, Jacob Morrison, take you, Catherine, to be my wife. I promise to honor you, respect you, and treat you as my equal in all things. I promise to work beside you, laugh with you, and build a life with you. I promise to love you fiercely and faithfully for all my days." Catherine's tears spilled over as she spoke her own vows. "I, Catherine Thornton, take you, Jacob, to be my husband. I promise to stand beside you in hardship and joy. I promise to trust your judgment, value your opinions, and build our future together. I promise to love you completely and courageously for as long as I draw breath." The rings were simple gold bands, but when Jake slid his onto Catherine's finger, it felt like sealing the most important promise of his life. "By the power vested in me," Pastor Reynolds said, his voice warm with genuine pleasure, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Jake, you may kiss your bride." Jake cupped Catherine's face in his large hands, gentle despite his strength, and kissed her with all the love he'd been holding back. The church erupted in applause, but Jake barely heard it. All he knew was Catherine's lips on his, her hands clutching his lapels, and the certainty that he was finally, truly, home. The celebration afterward was held in the churchyard. The townspeople had contributed food, and long tables groaned under the weight of pies, roasted meats, fresh bread, and summer vegetables. Catherine moved through the crowd with grace, thanking everyone for coming, and Jake watched her with pride. Martha Reynolds approached him with a knowing smile. "She's lovely, your bride, and the way she looks at you." She shook her head. "That's real love, Mr. Morrison. Anyone with eyes can see it." "I'm a lucky man," Jake said quietly. "You're both lucky. You found each other when you needed it most." Martha patted his arm. "Now go dance with your wife. Tom's got his fiddle out." Jake found Catherine surrounded by a group of women, all chattering about the ceremony. When she saw him, her face lit up, and she excused herself immediately. Jake offered his hand. "Mrs. Morrison, may I have this dance?" Catherine's smile was brilliant. "Mrs. Morrison, I like the sound of that." She took his hand, and Jake led her to the makeshift dance floor. He wasn't much of a dancer, but Catherine didn't seem to care. She followed his lead easily, her body fitting against his like they'd been dancing together for years. As Tom's fiddle played a sweet, slow melody, Jake held his wife close and let himself believe in happiness again. "Happy," he murmured against her hair. "Incredibly." Catherine pulled back just enough to look up at him. "Though I'll be happier when we're alone." The suggestion in her voice made Jake's blood heat. "Catherine, I'm your wife now, Jake Morrison. I'm allowed to want you." "We're in public," he said, but his arms tightened around her waist. "Then dance with me until we can leave without causing a scandal." Her eyes sparkled with mischief and promise. "And then take me home." Jake did exactly that. counting down the minutes until they could politely make their escape. Hutchins didn't attend, but Jake heard he'd gotten drunk at the saloon and ranted about gold diggers and fools. Jake didn't care. Let the old man talk. Nothing could touch the joy of sliding a simple gold band onto Catherine's finger and hearing her promise to love him until death parted them. As the sun began to set, Jake and Catherine finally said their goodbyes and climbed into the wagon. Jake had decorated it earlier with ribbons and tin cans, and the noise they made rolling down the road made Catherine laugh. "Very subtle," she teased. "I wanted everyone to know we're newlyweds," Jake grinned. "Propriety and all." Catherine moved closer, resting her head on his shoulder. "Take me home, husband." The word sent a thrill through Jake. Husband. He was someone's husband again, but this time felt different. With Sarah, he'd been young and idealistic, thinking love meant protecting and providing. With Catherine, he was older, wiser, and understood that real love meant partnership, meant seeing your spouse as an equal, not a dependent. When they reached Sweetwater Springs, Jake stopped the wagon and turned to Catherine. "I want to do this right." Before she could ask what he meant, Jake climbed down and came around to her side. In one smooth motion, he lifted her from the wagon, cradling her against his chest. Catherine gasped, her arms going around his neck. "Jake, put me down!" "Not until we cross the threshold. It's tradition." Jake carried her toward the main house, and Catherine stopped protesting, her eyes soft with love. "Which house?" she asked quietly. "The main house or the cabin?" Jake paused. They'd never discussed where they'd live as a married couple. The main house was grander, but the cabin had become his sanctuary. "Where do you want to be?" "With you. That's all that matters." Catherine touched his face gently. "But the main house has more room for when our family grows." The casual mention of future children made Jake's chest tighten. "You want children, don't you?" After what happened with Sarah, Jake's voice roughened. "I'm terrified. So am I," Catherine admitted, "but I'm more terrified of letting fear stop me from living, from building the life I want with you." She kissed him softly. "We don't have to decide tonight, or next month, or even next year. But someday when we're ready, yes, I want children with you, Jake Morrison." Jake carried her through the door of the main house, their house now, and finally set her on her feet. The interior was elegant but comfortable, decorated in Catherine's refined taste. His dusty boots looked out of place on the fine carpet. "I should take these off." Catherine's hands were already at his tie, loosening it with fingers that trembled slightly. "Later. Right now, I just want my husband." Jake caught her hands, stilling them. "Catherine, we don't have to rush. If you're nervous—" "I'm not nervous." She looked up at him, her green eyes dark with desire. "I've been waiting for this, wanting you. Please, Jake, make me yours." Jake's control shattered. He pulled her close and kissed her deeply, pouring 3 weeks of suppressed longing into it. Catherine responded with equal passion, her hands tangling in his hair, her body pressing against his. "I love you," Jake murmured against her lips. "God help me. I love you so much." "I love you too," Catherine breathed. "Show me, please show me." And Jake did, gently and thoroughly, treating his wife with all the reverence she deserved, while Catherine gave herself to him with a trust and passion that humbled him. In that big house on Sweetwater Springs, they sealed their marriage and their partnership, 2 broken souls finally made whole. The preacher pronounced them man and wife, and when Jake kissed his bride, the church erupted in applause. Catherine smiled against his lips, and Jake thought his heart might burst from his chest. The celebration afterward was simple but warm. The townspeople who'd once whispered about Jake being cursed now seemed willing to give him a fresh chance. Catherine charmed everyone with her genuine warmth and lack of pretension, and more than one person told Jake he was a lucky man. "I know," he said each time, watching his wife laugh with the church ladies. "Believe me, I know." As the sun set, Jake and Catherine rode back to Sweetwater Springs in the wagon, her head on his shoulder and his arm around her waist. The land was still dry, still struggling, but Jake felt hope for the first time in years. "What are you thinking?" Catherine asked softly. "That 3 months ago I was ready to give up, ready to let the bank take everything and just disappear. And now I'm married to the most incredible woman I've ever met. And we're building something real, something that matters." Catherine tilted her face up to his. "We're building it together, that's what makes it matter." Jake kissed her, slow and sweet, tasting promise and forever. When they broke apart, Catherine's eyes were soft with love, and Jake felt something he hadn't felt in 2 years. He felt like he'd come home. The first year of their marriage was hard work and small victories. Jake sold his old ranch to a young couple from the East, using the money to finally pay off his debts. It hurt to let go, but Catherine held his hand through it all, reminding him that the past was gone and the future was theirs to build. The day Jake signed over the deed, he stood on the porch of his old house one last time. The young couple, Thomas and Emma Hartford, were inside excitedly planning renovations. Jake could hear their laughter through the open windows, and it eased the ache in his chest. "You all right?" Catherine stood beside him, her hand slipping into his. "Yeah." Jake squeezed her fingers. "Just saying goodbye." To the house or to Sarah? Jake loved that Catherine could ask such questions without jealousy or fear. "Both, I think. This was supposed to be our forever home. Now it's someone else's dream." "You built something beautiful here," Catherine said softly. "Now you get to build something beautiful somewhere else. With me." Jake pulled her close, breathing in her scent. "How did I get so lucky?" "You didn't. You earned it. By being honest and hard-working and kind." Catherine looked up at him. "Ready to go home?" Home. Sweetwater Springs. Their ranch. Jake nodded, and they rode away without looking back. With the debt cleared, Jake threw himself into improving Sweetwater Springs with renewed focus. They brought in new cattle, hiring 3 reliable hands recommended by Pastor Reynolds. The hands, Miguel, a weathered cowboy from Mexico, James, a freed slave with excellent horse sense, and young Billy, eager to learn, proved their worth immediately. Catherine insisted on fair wages and decent living quarters for the men, which earned their fierce loyalty. Jake watched her interact with the ranch hands, treating them with respect and dignity, and fell a little more in love with her every day. But not everyone approved of their methods. One afternoon, a neighboring rancher named Dalton rode over, his expression sour. "Morrison, need a word." Jake straightened from the fence he was mending. "Mr. Dalton, what can I do for you? You can stop paying your hands twice what the rest of us do. You're making it hard for the rest of us to keep workers." Jake's jaw tightened. "I pay fair wages for honest work. What others pay is their business. It's everyone's business when you're driving up costs for the whole territory." Dalton's eyes narrowed. "And letting your wife make business decisions? That's not how things are done, Morrison." "That's exactly how things are done on my ranch." Jake's voice went cold. "Catherine is my partner in every sense. We make decisions together. She's a woman. She's smarter about business than most men I know." Jake stepped forward, his size alone making Dalton step back. "And she's my wife. You got something to say about her, you say it to my face. Then you leave my property." Dalton's face reddened. "You'll regret this, Morrison, mark my words." After he left, Catherine emerged from the house. She'd clearly heard everything. "You didn't have to defend me like that." "Yes, I did." Jake pulled her into his arms. "You're not just my wife, Catherine. You're my partner. Anyone who doesn't respect that doesn't deserve my respect." Catherine's eyes shimmered. Most men would be embarrassed by a wife who involves herself in business. Then most men are fools. Jake kissed her forehead. "I'm proud of you, proud of us. Don't ever doubt that." As summer turned to fall, Sweetwater Springs began to truly thrive. The cattle were healthy, the land was productive, and the springs continued to flow abundantly. Jake and Catherine settled into a comfortable partnership, working side by side during the day and falling into each other's arms at night. But the drought still held the surrounding territory in its grip. Neighboring ranches continued to fail, their wells running dry, their cattle dying. Jake and Catherine watched with heavy hearts as families packed up and left, abandoning dreams that couldn't survive without water. "We have to help," Catherine said one evening, watching another wagon roll past their gate. "How?" Jake asked. "We can't water the whole territory." "No, but we can share what we have." Catherine turned to him, her eyes blazing with determination. "Those springs produce more water than we need. What if we let neighboring ranchers bring their cattle here, charge them a fair price for water rights?" Jake considered the idea. It could work, but we'd need better fencing, more hands to manage the increased herd, and some ranchers would see it as charity. "Then we make it business, a contract. They pay for water access, we provide the resource, everyone benefits." Catherine grabbed paper and pencil, already sketching plans. "We could even offer employment to those who've lost everything, give them a chance to rebuild." Watching her work, her mind spinning with possibilities, Jake felt his chest swell with pride and love. This was what Catherine did best. See problems and create solutions. See suffering and offer hope. They spent the next week implementing the plan. Jake rode out to neighboring ranches, offering water contracts to those who needed them. Some refused out of pride, but others accepted gratefully. Within a month, Sweetwater Springs was supporting not just their own herd, but cattle from 5 other ranches. It was exhausting work. Jake and the hands worked from sunrise to sunset, managing the expanded operation. Catherine handled the business side, keeping meticulous records and ensuring everyone paid their fair share. At night, they collapsed into bed, too tired for anything but sleep. But they were making a difference. Families that would have lost everything were surviving. The territory was holding together instead of crumbling. Then Hutchins came calling. The old man looked worn and humble, his shoulders stooped. "Morrison, Mrs. Morrison, I need to talk to you both." Jake led him into the office where Catherine was working on the books. She looked up, her expression neutral. "Mr. Hutchins, what can we do for you?" "I need water." The words seemed to cost him. "My last well went dry this morning. My cattle are suffering." "I know I don't deserve your help after how I've treated you, but I'm asking anyway. Please." Jake and Catherine exchanged glances. This was the man who'd tried to drive them out, who'd spread lies and made their lives difficult. But he was also a neighbor in desperate need. "What are your terms?" Catherine asked coolly. Hutchins blinked. "Terms? We have water contracts with other ranchers. You'll need to sign one too. Pay the same rate everyone else does. Follow the same rules." Catherine pulled out a standard contract. No special treatment, no exceptions. Yes, of course." Hutchins reached for the paper with shaking hands. "Thank you. I know I don't deserve—" "You're right, you don't." Jake's voice was hard. "But we're not doing this for you. We're doing it for your cattle, who don't deserve to suffer for your mistakes, and for your wife, who's never done anything but try to be neighborly despite your behavior." Hutchins flinched, but nodded. "I understand, and for what it's worth, I'm sorry. For all of it. You're good people, and I was too blind and stubborn to see it." "Apology noted," Catherine said. Sign the contract. You can start bringing cattle over tomorrow." After Hutchins left, Jake pulled Catherine into his arms. "That was generous of you." "It was practical," Catherine corrected. "We have the water. He needs it. And charging him the same as everyone else means no one can accuse us of playing favorites or holding grudges. You're brilliant, you know that?" Catherine smiled against his chest. "I do know that, but it's nice to hear you say it." As fall deepened toward winter, something unexpected happened. The expanded operation at Sweetwater Springs became a community gathering point. Ranchers would come to check on their cattle and end up staying for coffee and conversation. Their wives came too, bringing children, swapping recipes and stories with Catherine. The ranch that had once been isolated became the heart of the struggling territory, and Jake and Catherine, the unlikely couple, became respected leaders, not because of wealth or status, but because of generosity and fairness. One evening, as they sat on their porch watching the sunset, Catherine leaned against Jake's shoulder. "We did good, didn't we? We did better than good." Jake kissed the top of her head. "We gave people hope." "We gave each other hope first," Catherine said softly. "Everything else just followed." Jake pulled her onto his lap, cradling her against his chest. She fit there perfectly, warm and solid and real. "I love you, Catherine Morrison. More every day. I love you too." Catherine's hand rested over his heart. "And I have news. News that's going to change everything." Jake's heart stuttered. "What kind of news?" Catherine took his hand and placed it on her still flat belly. "The kind that means you're going to be a father, Jake Morrison." For a moment Jake couldn't breathe, couldn't think. All he could feel was Catherine's hand over his, pressing his palm to where their child was growing. Fear hit him first, memories of Sarah's screams, of tiny lungs that never drew breath, but beneath the fear was something stronger, hope, love, the absolute certainty that this time would be different. "You're sure?" His voice was rough with emotion. "The doctor confirmed it yesterday." Catherine searched his face anxiously. "I know you're scared, I am too, but Jake, we're going to be all right, all three of us." Jake gathered her close, his face buried in her hair, and let the tears come. Joy and terror and overwhelming love. "A baby. We're having a baby. We're having a baby," Catherine confirmed, her own voice thick with tears. "Are you happy?" "Terrified. Ecstatic. Completely unprepared." Jake pulled back to cup her face, his thumbs brushing away her tears. "And yes, so incredibly happy." They held each other as the sun set over Sweetwater Springs, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Around them, cattle grazed peacefully on land kept green by abundant springs. In the distance, ranch hands were finishing evening chores, their voices carrying on the wind. This was home, this was family, this was everything Jake had thought he'd lost forever, returned to him in unexpected forms, a second chance at love, at fatherhood, at happiness. "Thank you," he whispered against Catherine's hair. "For what?" "For everything. For seeing something worth saving in a broken rancher. For building this life with me. For giving me hope again." Catherine pulled back to look at him, her green eyes blazing with love. "You gave me the same things, Jake Morrison. A real partnership, a true marriage, the life I always dreamed of but never thought I'd have." She placed his hand back on her belly. "And now we get to share all of it with this little one." Jake's large hand spread protectively over where their child grew. "I won't let anything happen to you, either of you. I know, but you also have to trust that I'm strong enough for this. That we're strong enough together." Catherine covered his hand with hers. "We've survived drought and debt and gossip and grief. We can survive anything, Jake, as long as we face it together." "Together," Jake agreed, and sealed the promise with a kiss. They brought in new cattle, hired 3 reliable hands, and slowly, methodically, built Sweetwater Springs into a profitable ranch. Catherine proved to have a head for business that complemented Jake's knowledge of the land. Together, they were formidable. Hutchins tried a few more schemes, a lawsuit over water rights that went nowhere, attempts to turn other ranchers against them, even a half-hearted effort to buy them out. But Jake and Catherine stood firm, united, and eventually even Hutchins seemed to accept defeat. The drought finally broke in the spring of their second year together. Jake stood in the rain, his face turned up to the sky, and laughed like a child. Catherine ran out to join him, and they danced in the mud like fools, kissing and laughing, and celebrating the miracle of water falling from the sky. That night, Catherine told him she was pregnant. Jake's hands trembled as they touched her still flat belly. "Are you sure?" "The doctor confirmed it yesterday." Catherine's eyes searched his face anxiously. "I know this brings back painful memories. If you need time—" "No." Jake pulled her close, his voice rough with emotion. "No, this is different. You're different. We're going to be all right, Catherine. All of us." She cried then, tears of relief and joy. And Jake held her and whispered promises into her hair. Promises he intended to keep. Their daughter was born on a warm October morning, healthy and loud and perfect. They named her Sarah Hope Morrison. Sarah for Jake's first wife, Hope for what Catherine had given him. Jake held his daughter with shaking hands, this tiny, perfect creature who had his dark hair and Catherine's green eyes. The fear he'd carried for 9 months melted away, replaced by fierce, overwhelming love. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "She's ours." Catherine smiled tiredly from the bed. "Our second chance, our new beginning." Jake sat beside his wife, their daughter cradled between them, and felt the last pieces of his broken heart finally heal. The past would always be part of him. Sarah and the son he'd lost, the ranch he'd given up, the years of drought and despair. But they didn't define him anymore. What defined him now was this: Catherine's hand in his, their daughter sleeping peacefully, the ranch they'd built together, the life they were creating one day at a time. "I love you," he said, looking between his wife and his daughter. "Both of you, more than I thought possible." "We love you too." Catherine leaned her head against his shoulder. "Our gentle giant, our second chance, our home." Outside, the sun set over Sweetwater Springs, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The cattle grazed peacefully in fields made green by spring rains. The springs ran clear and strong, providing water not just for their ranch, but for their neighbors as well. Jake had come to Catherine thinking he needed water to save his dying land. What he'd found instead was so much more. He'd found partnership and purpose and love. He'd found a woman who saw past his failures to the man he could become. He'd found forgiveness for the past and hope for the future. He'd found home. Years later, when people asked Catherine why she'd chosen Jake Morrison, a broke, desperate rancher with nothing to his name, she always smiled and gave the same answer: "Because he was exactly what I needed. Someone honest and hardworking who saw me as a partner, not a prize. Someone who'd lost everything but never lost his kindness. Someone willing to build something new from the ruins of the old." She'd pause, her green eyes soft with remembered joy. "And because when he looked at me, I felt like I was worth choosing. That's worth more than all the water in Texas." And Jake, overhearing this, would pull his wife close and whisper in her ear, "You were always worth choosing. I'm just grateful you chose me back." Their daughter grew up hearing stories of the drought that brought her parents together, of the man who'd lost everything and the woman who'd offered more than water. She'd offered partnership, understanding, and love. Young Sarah Hope would listen wide-eyed, then ask, "But Papa, what if Mama hadn't come? What if you'd lost the ranch?" Jake would exchange a look with Catherine over their daughter's head, and his answer was always the same: "Then I would have lost the ranch. But because your mother came, I gained everything that matters. I gained her. I gained you. I gained a life worth living. The ranch was just land, sweetheart. Your mother gave me a home." And Catherine would smile, remembering a dusty Texas afternoon when she'd stepped out of a carriage and offered a partnership to a desperate man. She'd been looking for someone to help her manage a ranch. Instead, she'd found the love of her life. Sometimes the best things come when we're not looking for them. Sometimes salvation arrives in unexpected forms. And sometimes when the rain refuses to fall and hope seems lost, the answer isn't water at all. Sometimes it's love. The end.